So how are you, Bella? You're looking stylish.
Oh, wow. Well, I do feel the eight, and I wouldn't say that style is what has most felt activated. I've really felt in the body graph, we have that middle pillar where the eight is part of. And I've been feeling that activation of the life force, of the Kundalini. I've been this morning, I didn't want to get up. I just wanted to close my eyes and feel that life force in me. So bliss has been one of the words, but then at the same time, I'm overwhelmed because this is a very feminine, it's part of the coloring of water. It's made up of the element of water and earth. So very, very feminine. And I've been feeling that I've been pushing. So I felt a bit of overwhelm because it kind of just wants you to be in your natural, agent, naturally being agent for creativity, right? Is the eight. And then I also feel with the individual circuitry that there is a pulse and there's a mutation that's happening. So a little bit like, oh, what's going on? What's this? So bliss, overwhelm, and like, what's going on is kind of like what's in my world, in my body, in my experience right now.
Mm, that's great. So that's interesting in relationship to gene key 8, which is where the sun is passing through right now. And as that light shines from the sun reflecting off the moon, the separation that we experience within is that shadow frequency of mediocrity. And when we look at the central energy channel that is moving through our bodies, if we are going to be able to tap into the essence that we are and allow that to come through us into expression in the world, that central channel has to be connected. And we have to be connected to the energy that's flowing through it. And we've been working on this central channel for a few weeks now. Obviously, as the sun is going around the calendar, it's jumping through a few of them, but we had gene key 2 a few weeks ago. We did gene key 23, which is directly opposite gene key 8 in the throat, on the top side of the throat. And this central pillar is kind of coming online as we're moving through this period of the movement of the sun. And um, I've been feeling a lot of experience where, you know, as soon as we move into a new gate or transit, it's not as if it's not as if all of a sudden we're like, oh man, I feel like a mediocre human being living a mediocre life in a mediocre experience. If that's what we're doing, we've been doing that all year. It's not like something that just jumps up into our awareness, but the tendency toward that unique expression, which it sounds like you're describing a tendency towards the unique expression of your own system, is like, it's subtle, but it if you're paying attention, it comes to you. And I in some ways had a similar experience of kind of wanting to just experience my own flow of energy today without having to follow a schedule that's determined by, from my perspective, outer authorities, stuff that I didn't decide, right? And that's very much a part of what's going on here. Do you want to look at that on the calendar just to see that central channel? Um, yeah, so I keep as we go through each gate, I keep thinking back to the programming partners, and I can't remember if we've actually covered them or if it was just the partner that we were going through at the time. Um, but yeah, we've done 3, we've done 2, we've done 23, and we've done 8. Today is 8.
Yeah, so what you're showing or speaking about is this middle pillar. So very much the middle channel from in this whole pillar. And you are saying, I mean, now we're in the 8, we were looking at the 3 like a month ago, we were in the 2. So there's been and then the 23, and the programming partner is the 43. So very much going on here in the 24th as well. So all these
Yeah.
are part of what's activating, and also knowing, because we were speaking in the 3, that somehow we call that the eternal child. So that is a kind of beginning. The one before is endings, the 42. So really from the eternal child, from the birth of that eternal child here in the 3, that pulse that is there from our sacral, so many of the gates, so many of the transits we've been through are individual, and individual circuitry has to do with your inner knowing. It has to do with uniqueness, has to do with differentiation, has to do with that knowing coming out in the world in one way or another. And also the melancholy of feeling that the world is not ready for that knowing or for that truth, and there's nobody listening, and there's nothing happening, and there's nothing changing. So a lot of that, existential also aloneness in a way, and the melancholy of like not fitting in. So that's been really a theme in many of those gates that we've been in since here on the cusp between Aries and Taurus. So that's, and I feel like at this point, what I was speaking about right in the beginning of the call, I feel like there have been enough of those gates to actually start to kind of crack through something, and kind of the water and the earth, the water kind of coming into the cracks, and now actually, it's happening. It's
Mm.
yeah.
Yeah, I was looking at some of the materials of yogic science today about how that central channel functions and the relationship of the solar energies to igniting the kundalini. And there's speaking of style, one of the gift of Gene Key 8, one of the things that human beings today do with style on at least a surface level is the way that we keep our hair. And for some people, that's extraordinarily important. Um, I I don't really know what it actually costs, but I know that across this country, for a woman to regularly receive hair treatments, stylings, and cuts to keep it in the style that she desires can be quite an investment compared to walking into a barbershop off the street for a $12 clip, you know. um, so to me, what that means is that the style is valuable. But what I was looking at today is what is the role of hair in our energy systems?
Mm.
What happens with hair? And there was some suggestion that when hair reaches its total length, it creates a shift in how the nerve endings that connect into the brain through the scalp deliver information into the brain that triggers a certain release of hormones and chemicals in your brain that leads solar energies to come down through the crown and descend down that central column. And because of the way of spiritual physics working, you can't have a dissension of energy without an equal ascension of energy happening within this toroidal form of our fully activated energetic bodies. So if we reach the point where we're able to receive what a lot of people are talking about as a download, there's people on Facebook, on the internet going, oh, I got this download from Archangel Michael, or whatever their spirit guides or wherever it's coming from. That downward movement of energy creates an upward pulse of energy that comes from the coiling down at the root of your spine. And as that Kundalini energy rises, the unique energies of your life force begin to pulsate out of you. And this is really what this gene key is about, is that unique essence no longer being held tied up inside of us, but to start pulsating out, first into our energy bodies and then out into the world through us. So I think it's kind of funny that we still relate to like we relate to hair in our current society through this lens of style. What's your hairstyle? And how important that is for a unique expression. And yet there's still this shadow frequency going on in so many people's lives, stylish hair or not, that kind of has a dimming effect on the light that we're capable of emitting into the world.
Yeah, I was going to bring up maybe do you want to speak about the repressive and the reactive, or where do you
that would be great. I think that's a great idea.
Let's see.
Because I think with this particular gene key, it's really easy to relate to those qualities, regardless of our experience, just because so much of our experience is dependent upon the conditioning that we receive from birth.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's all the way down here. So, I mean, I guess when you are speaking about the hairstyle, I mean, I remember living in Paris, or I remember living in New York, or even Stockholm. It's very much like those expensive places where you pay hundreds of dollars for somebody or for a brand of like hairstylists. And really, when we look at the reactive nature, it is artificial. I would say artificial or superficial. And of course, being in Miami as well, I mean, here it's maybe more like plastic surgery. But I mean, I sometimes stand in the line, at Trader Joe's, and I look like I can't help like looking at the person that's be like in front of me, and I know that that's not usually. Like, I wonder where those pants were even bought, because I don't know how she gets in these things, in the pants. And it's just crazy. I mean, much of it is not even natural. It's like, it is, I mean, I guess it's a style, but it's not necessarily a style that for me is very inspiring, but it's this artificial way. And the same thing with lips and fillers, it's very artificial. It doesn't really look human. And that would take us maybe into this whole like transhuman agenda. Like, how much of us is really flesh, and how much is it a mix of other materials that we are. And I mean, even the fact that now your hip doesn't work. Okay, so let us screw and set in some things in there so that it works again. Like how much of us is going to still be organic, and how much is going to be other materials. That I feel is important with this eighth. And it's a little bit of also what we would say creativity versus copying. We could say China, you know, they can make everything as, but how, yeah, like what's the difference of innovation and copying? So that's what I feel with the reactive. It's kind of like, you know, it's imitating style in a way, you know, it's not your own, it's an imitation of style. And then the wooden, I
Well,
guess.
I want to, there was something that came up for me about that I think is also relevant, especially in terms of considering this idea of mediocrity. And, you know, we think today, particularly in a growing world of social media, I know that young people today, teenagers, younger than that, are developing this relationship with social media where they understand their social acceptability based on the amount of social media approval that they receive for their posts, their pictures, the things that they show. And in terms of a human being's development, one of the things that's like absolutely required to not only to just survive, but certainly in order to reach any degree of your potential, you require some degree of attention from others. You know, without attention when we're born, we're helpless, like we would just die. So that's programmed into our bodies to have a positive survival response to attention. And in a world that is, you know, there's what, 8 point something billion people on the planet at this point. I mean, how do you stand out in a world of 8 billion people? Well, first of all, you can't be mediocre. And in order to garner that attention, people are, it's like they're trying to be the best at this system of mediocrity that the whole world is infected by. What's acceptable, what looks good, what, you know, what is successful. You know, you can find all sorts of people who are taking fake videos or fake photographs of them, like in what's supposed to be like a vacation place, to say, oh, I'm on vacation somewhere. And really they're just using some camera tricks to make it look like they're somewhere special when really they're in their backyard or they're in their basement, or, you know, like, I get it. There's probably some monetary incentive behind that. But that drive to stand out and what we receive in exchange for standing out really like creates there's a lot of incentive behind being artificial. You know, if you figure out that you're good at being artificial, you can get a lot of attention coming your way in a world of mediocrity. And that's very, in a way, damaging to the evolution of the collective, because whatever that uniqueness that's inside a person who's living an artificial way, now the world is being robbed of that unique expression. No one's going to see that underneath all of that stuff. And it's not a very conducive environment to encourage it either. So I wanted to talk about that for a minute, just because, you know, it's so pervasive on so many levels in our world today, and we have so many reasons to want to move beyond our station as being mediocre, yet we can just react to it and we're not really achieving anything. We're just like at the top of the mediocre heap. You know. And eventually, to me, eventually that's going to transform into that wooden expression.
Hmm. Yeah, when I hear you talk, I do I do feel into culture as well, and I feel like
Mm,
into, I wouldn't, I mean, you could say it's two kinds of people. There are people that have a dream in a way. They think it's a dream. It's a kind of style that they want to have. And
mm,
they work, they go to school, they work, they do all these things so that they can have that style. And then when they have that, then they, it's probably, it's going to be one step more than what they were born into. But then they come up, they kind of climb that ladder, but then they are happy. And I think that's the thing with the eight and with this whole middle pillar. Like kundalini is never just like going to stop because now it's enough. It's always going to increase the voltage. It's
yeah.
that like we can hold more and more voltage in our vessels, the more transparent we become, in a way, the more pure we become. And that's what I see. That's a bit like the wooden. In the beginning, it looks like style. It looks like aspiration of something more. But the day that you have come up to that point where your mind thinks, oh, this is the style, this is the house, this is the car, this is the wife, this is what I've been working for, and then you kind of become a couch potato instead. Like that's the sad thing, because like what Richard is saying is like, style is not skin deep. It's really like the cutting edge of evolution. So style can
Mm,
never stop. And when it
right.
stops, it's like you don't have a dream anymore. And it was never a dream. It was just a climbing a ladder to some mind point of that ladder. And of course, that's what becomes hollow or wooden, or kind of giving up your own life force and your own unique expression. And then there are so many others that are going to stay at that same level, or a little here, a little there. I feel like it's connected to culture, because I can see it when I look in Sweden. I know people went to business school with me. I know what kind of house they have around what kind of lake or what kind of place in the archipelago, what kind of plates they have. Like, I don't really know for other culture, but in Sweden they're like plates that you're supposed to have, and like those brands that you're supposed to have. And
Right.
like that's what everybody wants. But at the end of the day, if 80% of whoever went to business school with me wants that, it's kind of mediocre and it's kind of boring, right? And then there are other things, in France that I saw, oh my God, this is what people are. But yeah, it's, even if it's, and I think that's a good distinction, because here we are not speaking about the average. Like, style doesn't have to do with average. You are not in style, even if you're above average in money or style or art on
Right.
your walls. It's not about average. Style, in the way we speak about in the jinx, is always evolving. It's always cutting edge. It never stops. And that's what's important. It's alive, it's moving, it's part of that Shakti Kundalini, creative force in us. um yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the idea, somebody, one of the people that I grew up as one of my heroes, he was really kind of a horrible person to everybody. Well, maybe not everybody, but most people around him, most of the time. But a good example of this is Miles Davis, the jazz trumpet player who played from the late 1940s all the way up until the 1990s. And in the 1940s, he was playing the style of bebop, which is this sort of fast, you know, sounding music that's real complicated, and there's lots of different notes being played. And for most people, that's not really what they like listening to. But he went through that all the way through these various stages of an evolution of that into like this free form kind of wild type music in the 60s. Finally in the 70s he created these fusions of funk and jazz and like, you know, different different stuff. In 1991 he was making rap records. I mean, like, he literally didn't stop evolving his style his entire life. It was like the only thing that he cared about. And in, in so many ways when we think about, well, oh, do you have, what's your style? What's the definition of how you are? If you become the cutting edge of, if you enter into the full possibility of what you can become, there is no ending to that evolution. It's always going to look different as you continue making choices and moving forward in your life. It's really, really a pretty extraordinary gift to have in terms of your ability to make waves in the world. I mean, a lot of the gene keys that we've been working with and moving through, um, so many of them have such a profound impact on our own individual experience, from moving from a shadow frequency into being able to manifest some of those gift frequencies. But this one, it's like you can change the world with this one just by yourself. You know, and it's kind of what happens when somebody shows up in the world who, you know, we could argue about how authentic a person may be or how artificial they might be, but a person that shows up like Lady Gaga, who has a very different style, you know, becomes an international megastar like overnight. Someone like Sia, or a longer time back, Bjork was somebody who had a really unique style, and it moved the direction of pop music in a big way. It's really pretty incredible what a single person with this gift activated can achieve in the world.
Yeah, I agree.
Um,
I mean,
do you
this is
want to maybe do you want to maybe dig a little deeper into the repressive side, just because I feel like
I mean, I feel like it's like I was saying, when the dream is not a real dream, you know, it's like
mm,
you thought it was a dream, but you stop at some point and you don't think it's possible anymore. And I guess
oh
what I
yeah,
would like to go into a little bit more is that this is part of, so we call it incarnation crosses. So when somebody's born, I'm gonna share again.
yeah, please.
When somebody's born with the 8 in the life's work, well, then automatically, if the sun is in the 8, on the other side, we're going to have the earth, which is the 14. So it's always going to be this opposition. And what we know is that when we look at at somebody's birth chart, we're going to be at the sun and we're going to go back in time 3 months, and then we're going to have where we say that the soul incarnated in the body, and it's going to be another sun and another earth. So that cross that's created between
Mm,
these two suns and earths, it's one of them is the 8 and the 14 together with the 29 and the 30, which happens, you happen to have that as well, John. And for me, these people, like, it's called the cross of contagion. These
mm,
people are amazing, and especially with the 8 as the life's work, like there is something really special, there is something really unique. And with that 14, which is the earth, that's the pure power of the sacral center. And then you have the
mhm.
unique, you know, agent for creativity.
You
And
bet.
with the 39, and sorry, the 29 and the 30 and the 29, it is lightness and rapture. You know, it's like, it's really, really powerful. So for me, those people are, and I've seen them in all kinds of places in society. Like you say, it can be music, but it can also be like, maybe not politics, but like diplomacy,
Mhm.
for example, like something more kind of wide, where that 14, the wagon, is going to take you around to different places in your own unique style, because that 30, that
Mm,
30 has a desire to experience, the 29 has a desire to say yes to life. So it is a
mm.
very, very powerful cross when we have the 8, the 14, the 29, and the 30. And that's been, you know, that's been the cross all week. It's going to change over when it becomes transpersonal, but that's from the first 4 days of the transit, has we have that cross, and it's really, really, really powerful.
Yeah,
um
so if you're having a baby this week, watch out.
and really, I mean, that goes back to the shadow. Like, it's very important for that child that it doesn't stop dreaming, you know, in the sense that it doesn't fall into mediocrity and compromise,
Mm.
which would be the shadow frequency of the 14. And that it knows what it says yes to, because the 29 is, you know, it's about saying fully yes, but you can't say fully yes to everything, because like there's so many things to say yes to. So yeah, it's
Yeah, I think it seems relevant to simply point out what really drives this particular shadow into settling in as an energetic identification that we use to create our personality into the world, is this sort of deep survival fear of of essentially one of the oldest fears that we have within human society is of ostracization. When human beings lived in a tribal setting where each member of the tribe was not only a contributor but also a dependent of the others in the tribe, we could look at each other in the face, look at each other in the eyes and say, this person brings food, this person heals the sick, this person, you know, we knew exactly what roles were being fulfilled by each person. And if you were kicked out of that group, chances are you were going to die, because it was going to be unlikely that you had all the skills needed to survive for very long without that interconnected support system of your tribe. So we have this deep fear of of being too different from the group that we exist within, because of the possibility of being cut off from our necessities for survival. So because of that fear operating in us, in now, like I mentioned, an 8 billion plus population world, where you don't actually have to know any of the people who are providing all of the things that you need. You know, if you have an internet connection, you can pretty much survive for the rest of your life without seeing another human being. If you got a way to, you know, generate money for yourself, or you just got enough saved up or whatever it is. So when that fear is active inside a person, in, you know, terms of engaging with our dreams, or in accepting the conditioning that we've received from the group, the choice to manifest that shadow is going to be much more likely. And we're just going to identify with that for as long as our systems can sustain that. And I don't know, Bella, if there's a different name for this in Sweden, but people don't talk about it quite so much anymore as they used to. But the phenomenon of a midlife crisis, where a person gets into their 40s and like all of a sudden their entire life falls apart, their marriage falls apart, their career falls apart, like everything just falls apart. And, you know, I remember also after a little while of that being in people's collective awareness, the quarter life crisis started happening. People were like following this pathway to get into the right college, and then get the right degree, and then get the right job. And then a couple years into being in that job, they're like, I don't know what I'm doing with my life. I just spent the last 15 years of my only 25 years of life, you know, like satisfying this system that I hate.
Mhm.
So, I mean, when you're looking at that 8 to 14, and that, I mean, that's another straight up and down that central channel. I mean, we're in a powerful spot looking at that central channel. And that means that the shadow of these manifestations are going to be equally powerful for us.
Mhm.
And that means if we aren't able to open ourselves to the possibility of the gift that has come from our shadow experiences, then the forced awareness that will come upon us will come stronger and harder in these particularly powerful areas than they might in some of the other, regardless of, you don't have to have that cross of contagion to have this experience. You don't even have to have an activated uh, 8 gate. It's just there, and it's part of our life. And there's, regardless of how we end up choosing to authentically relate with this energetic movement, the the energy of life force in us is going to encourage us to move in the direction of that expression of evolution of style.
Yeah, and I love how you're putting this, and what I see in front of me is that like strangling, right, of the life force, and it happens to be in the throat. So it's really a strangling also of that unique voice that is happening. And of course, it's in the
Yeah.
middle. It's going to really impact everything that is on the way up. So yeah, absolutely. And also knowing that it's not always you that decides. So my mom has the 8.1 in her SQ, which happens to be in the gene key chart. The SQ is the very center of the 11 spheres. So she has it there, and it's childhood. And when she started school, she had never had a book. She had basically no toys, and she didn't even have a toothbrush because her parents were young and they didn't even know about toothbrushing. So she was really a unique child, but she had no resources in those 7 first years. And she really felt like the mediocrity of like not being able to evolve because there's no toolbox for you. But when
Mm.
she started school, like very, very soon, with everything that was there in the toolbox for her, she became really, really expressive. And she started to sing, to play the guitar, to do like the little
Mhm.
theater things for people in school. And that's the thing, it's sometimes, I mean, to look at as well. And maybe that is kind of an activity for us this week. Like look at those 7 first years of your life and see what is the cellular imprinting that you got. Like how much was that conducive for you building your own unique style and voice in the world, or how depleted of creativity and resources was it? Because whether we know it or not, that is the cellular imprint that very likely we're going to keep repeating.
Mm.
So there might be some work, there might be something with the transmission today that is actually starting to dissolve on a deeper level some of these false beliefs that are not even in the mind, but it's actually in the DNA, in the cells replicating. And it doesn't need to replicate, because now you are your own parent, your own adult, and you can provide those tools for you to be in your unique style and voice.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought up imprinting as a part of this particular um, transit, because um, in the quantum healing realm, or at least the tools that I use in order to assist with the movements of these energies, there's only so many types of transmissions that affect us. I mean, just like in human design, our energy systems work in particular ways. And we might look at gene key 8 and say, oh, it's in our throat, and it's all about expressing style. Well, let's do a throat chakra activation, and just to like amp up that power, and but bringing into awareness the role that imprints have upon our process of expression. The patterns that we develop in those early stages of life often become structural patterns that we then continue to run our life force energy through, regardless of how we develop into an adult. And a lot of those patterns are derived from the environment that we're born into, the type of attention that we receive when we're extraordinarily impressionable, and the degrees of experiences that we have. And those pathways of energy movement can either encourage us to open up to our unique possibilities, or they can encourage us to fall into one of those repressive or reactive patterns. And when we have this imprinting, you know, Bella, what you're suggesting is deeply at the level of the cells and of the DNA, the very material structure of our bodies is rebuilding itself in the form of these imprints. And if you allow that to continue throughout your whole life, when you become an elderly person at some point stage in your life, it's likely you're going to see these patterns solidified into your body or your way of being in some form or another. And, you know, that's one of the movements that we want to be able to loosen up and allow for more flexibility so that our conscious choices can actually guide who and what we become in the future. So if you're watching on Facebook, thanks for joining us for this week's conversation. The quantum healings, you can click on in the links in the comments, just check out there or make a comment that you'd like to receive access to those, and we'll reply directly to you. We're going to continue on with our members for that quantum healing transmission, and maybe a little of extra conversation just for fun, if there's any questions from our members. And I have to do that. And